Hey guys, it's Bio Hazardia. So this video is going to be a bit different from the ones that I usually do. It's not going to be a tutorial, and it's not going to be about artwork at all, actually. However, it is going to be about Wings of Fire, and specifically, it's going to be about the things that I've learned about Wings of Fire from TUI, the author of Wings of Fire, when I've talked to her at events or panels. Some of you might know that I really like going to Wings of Fire events. I very much enjoy meeting other fans in person, and I also really like talking to TUI and just supporting her at these events. I highly recommend going to a Wings of Fire event if you ever can, because they're just really fun, and TUI is so sweet and wonderful and really loves to answer questions from her readers and talk to them. When I go to Wings of Fire events, I usually bring a lot of questions to ask. Some joke that I bring a book of questions, which, yeah, let's be real, it's a book. But back in February 2020, right before the pandemic hit, I went to a big science fiction convention called Boskone with a lot of other amazing and wonderful friends of mine. I'll put their names here on screen for you to check out their channels if you'd like. But anyway, at Boskone, me and my friends were basically able to talk to TUI for 3 days, and we learned all sorts of stuff about Wings of Fire from her. I've already posted what we learned on the WIKIA and on my Instagram and DeviantArt and such, so I kind of consider the things that I learned here and that I'll be talking about here to be old news. For example, it was at this convention that we found out that the protagonist of book 14 is actually Queen Snowfall, and that's the first time we were able to share it publicly with the fandom. And now at this point, I'm pretty sure that literally everyone in the Wings of Fire fandom knows that Queen Snowfall is the protagonist. But I was talking to a couple of friends recently, and they told me that a lot of the information that was found out at Boskone isn't really known to the YouTube Wings of Fire community. I guess that I never actually uploaded the info that we found out here. So my friends said that uploading a video about all the things I asked TUI, and my friends asked TUI, and all the things that we learned during the events would be super helpful. And that's what this video is going to be about. I'll try to include what I learned from Boskone and also some questions and interesting things that I learned from other events that I went to, like the Lost Continent release party back in 2018. You can find links to basically a written transcript of this video in the description, which are all the original journals that I made to tell the fan about the things that I learned at the Wings of Fire events. Otherwise, most of this information is kind of a few months old or even years old, so I'm sorry if you consider it old news. But if it's new news to you, or if you just want to listen to all this info over again, then please enjoy. Some of the events that I was at, I actually managed to record the conversations with TUI, so of course it was a bit difficult to record because a lot of it was sort of a back and forth, just conversation between my friends and I and TUI, but in some of the cases, I'll include the original recording because, like, honestly, the conversations were absolutely hilarious, and I just really want to share them with you guys. And speaking of which, I'm gonna kick this off with the moment that we found out that Queen Snowfall was the protagonist for the first time. So I guess another really big question is, can you give us any hints about the protagonist of the next book? 14? It has been the biggest, fiercest question in the entire fandom.
No,
It's a really smart point, yeah.
the theory right now, like the general theory is that the book 14 protagonist is Lynx.
Yeah, it's gonna be Sky. Wait. What
do you mean?
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't have said that.
No,
but...
it's okay. I got permission to tell you guys.
All right, who is it?
I emailed my editor yesterday and I was like, can I please tell them they're one of my favorite people and I really want to. So
This has got to be all dramatic. All right.
Yeah, the chat's going crazy. Please. Hot off the presses.
So, okay. So you're close on Lynx. It's actually
Snowfall. Yeah, so that was extremely epic, and we were basically all losing our minds at that point. But some other information that we learned about Queen Snowfall at Boskone 2020 was that, first of all, Lynx will play a major role in book 14, and that she'll help temper Snowfall in her isolationist anxieties and fears. We also learned that we'll definitely see Winter again in book 14, and that Snowfall is not 7 yet because she hadn't made it to the adult wall by the end of book 10. TUI also noted that somebody, a she, in book 14 knows more than they're letting on with respect to current events. At this point, TUI was still writing book 14, so she hadn't decided how the book would end yet, and she did say that she has difficulty writing the 4th book in a 5-book arc because she likes the main character to help change the world, but also leave some problems there for the finale. She described Snowfall as particularly fun to write since Starflight and Turtle were more scared and passive, whereas Snowfall is also scared but in a very powerful and reactive way. When Snowfall gets upset and scared, she acts out very dramatically, which drives the story forward. And personally, I'm really excited for this. I want to see Snowfall bring the pals down, yo. Can't wait till she says something like, "Off with their heads," and then Lynx stares at her in horror and everything goes to pieces. I think it's going to be extremely entertaining. But otherwise, TUI said that Snowfall has white scales and dark blue eyes, and she also has a heavy crown that was her mother's with diamonds and metallic spikes that look like icicles. And she says that Snowfall is very excited to get the crown, but then it becomes a source of frustration because it's really heavy and too big for her. And here I'm thinking there's some symbolism. Another interesting thing is that Snowfall is very different from the characters that TUI has written so far, and is the most different from TUI herself out of all the protagonists. TUI's definitely aware that most of the fandom sees Snowfall as sort of a mean girl bad guy character, and that she has a lot more power than most of the other protagonists. But she also wants to explore how Snowfall has also recently gone through some enormous trauma, the ICEWING plague, and I think a lot of us can really relate to it, given that we're all going through the whole coronavirus plague right now as well. Snowfall is heavily driven by fear and anxiety, and in pursuing Arc 3's theme of empathy and resistance, TUI wanted to explore a type of character that most people can't fathom empathizing with. She hopes to tie Snowfall's anxieties and worries to her own in order to relate to her more and to help the audience relate to her more. Another interesting thing is that this is the first time that TUI has had to think for a long time about who would be the protagonist. In Snowfall, she wanted a protagonist who is extremely different from all the other protagonists and who would come from a very different perspective. But she does want Snowfall's perspective to change and develop over the course of the book, so hopefully we'll see some tasty character development. Finally, Jerboa 2 was apparently one of the potential main characters that TUI was considering for book 14. And TUI said that we will, hopefully, in book 14, find out what happens to Animus magic. It may or may not have to do with Jerboa. When we were talking to her about it, we said that we suspected Jerboa was messing with the Animus magic, and TUI just kind of made a funny expression at us and was like, "This is my expression," when we told her the popular fandom theory that Jerboa messed with the Animus magic. Another question we asked TUI is, whenever we talk to you, we always have a lot of questions. Do you have any questions that you'd want to ask your fans? And this was TUI's answer.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. I mean, I love this. I love getting to sit and like chat with you guys and sort of find out what you're interested in. I guess I'm always curious when I sit down to write a book, like, have I picked the right main character? Is there anyone I'm forgetting that people would like to see more of? Like, are there any stories I've forgotten that I should go back to? I mean, I definitely have a list that I'm planning to go back to. Nice. But you know, if there's anything that I find it really helpful, actually, to hear from fans. Like, I mean, yes, I know everyone wants a Kinkajou book.
Yeah, so TUI's pretty aware that everybody wants a Kinkajou book, of course, and then she's also aware that people really want to go back to the Mudwings. She acknowledged straight out that
it's true, the Mudwings are kind of neglected.
So yeah, she did say that she wanted to get back to Sora and Umber if possible, but it would be very difficult to do, given that she'd have to fit it into the books and fit it into the plot. The next question was a really hilarious one asked by Xbox Cat, and it concerns what would happen if somebody gave Peacemaker one of Kibley's earrings that nullifies all of Darkstalker's magic, and what would happen if Peacemaker put it on?
I have it on my list, but it's your question.
There's like this huge thing going on where it's like, if someone just gave Someone just gave Peacemaker one of those earrings
That Kibble made.
that Kibble made to
That nullifies all of Darkstalker's
If
magic.
Peacemaker put it on, would Darkstalker just morph right back into existence and be like,
That's a good question.
where am I?
Oh my
So
god.
yeah, so like, or he could just die. I guess
think
we're reverse the immortality cell too. So Peacemaker just dissolve into dust, like Thanos does.
Turn into Darkstalker and just melt away.
It's like a disappearing act, some sort of Rosencrantz Guildenstern type
You
stuff.
just like eat it up, you just like pop it in.
So yeah.
I'm afraid I think that's what would happen.
Peacemaker's gonna be Thanos out of existence.
I mean, or like you'd like turn back into Darkstalker and then immediately get old and then immediately die. It would be it could be really horrible.
Like just a rapid.
The channel's PTAU is
Mildly
very
horrifying
happy.
for the fans to enjoy.
I have like this whole theory that Darkstalker will just like immediately rise back into power again, just be like, where did what happened? Why do I have memories of being a baby?
Like a totally different tragedy. I mean, feel free to write that fan fiction. But
Oh my god.
More than just the idea of actually doing
This
that.
person wrote, "Child dies after dressing fashionably."
I don't feel so good. Watch your I don't feel so good.
Wow.
That's so sad. So you think I can guarantee that's not going to happen in the book?
I think
it keep but you're
I think
waiting
like
for
everyone in
Peacemaker.
Phantom's hearts would break, but it'd be hilarious.
It would be
Yeah.
Just talking to one of his little dragonette friends, suddenly this huge dragon appears out of nowhere.
The next couple questions are about ClearSight. One of them is, since ClearSight saw happy futures with Darkstalker, they must have been possible. What would have led to those happy futures with Darkstalker becoming real? So we were talking about this together as a group, and Tui said that ClearSight not using her mind-reading shielding bracelet would have helped because Darkstalker would have been able to go into her mind and see all the terrible futures his actions were causing. One of the issues is that Darkstalker never really went to examine the futures like ClearSight did, and he was just very confident in his abilities. So if he had been stuck in her mind, he would have gotten to see the futures, and therefore he might have worked harder to avoid the bad futures. But Tui said that we should not blame ClearSight for what happened with Darkstalker, because Darkstalker is responsible for his own actions, and many of his own actions are the source of the issues that ruined their relationship, as well as what happened to the Nightwings. She had a horrified face when somebody in the group suggested it's all ClearSight's fault, and personally I agree with this. I think it's kind of odd that the fandom kind of says, oh, you know, Darkstalker did no wrong, he's a soft, edgy boy, and Darkstalker definitely did a lot of really horrible things. And at the end of the day, his actions are his own fault, and you can't really blame ClearSight for things that Darkstalker did. Another question is ClearSight still alive somehow, or will ClearSight ever come back?
So I was thinking, so when I wrote like books 6, 7, and 8, I actually was thinking, like, is there a way that either ClearSight is still alive or that Darkstalker like brings her back, like zombie ClearSight? And I had
that would
this
be
whole,
amazing. But...
right? I was like, what if she was like buried in the cave with him, and when he woke up, he found her bones, and then he reanimated them.
Oh yes, actually.
That would be brutal.
Yes.
Right, well, exactly. So then I was like, luckily, I asked Amanda if I could write Darkstalker before I wrote book 9. And in the process of writing Darkstalker, I was like, wait, I can't do that to ClearSight. That would be so awful if she was like, I defeated him, now I'm going to lie down and die. So sad. And I was like, I need her to have like her own adventures and go off and have her own life, like doing something else. And so that was actually what sort of led us to the Lost Continent.
The next question is an interesting one, which is how exactly are the HIVEWINGS descended from the NIGHTWINGS, or ClearSight, and the BEETLEWINGS? I know that there have been a lot of fan theories that the HIVEWINGS aren't actually descended from ClearSight or the BEETLEWINGS, and that the HIVEWINGS and the SILKWINGS aren't actually related, but this question firmly debunks that theory. Tui explained that when ClearSight came to the Lost Continent, the BEETLEWINGS were all the same, just living in different places, similar to how the SAPWINGS and the POISONWINGS are all still LEAFWINGS, but just living in different villages. The introduction of ClearSight's very strong genetic material to one of these sects of BEETLEWINGS caused them to diverge into a different tribe, HIVEWINGS, and the other sect ended up diverging into the SILKWINGS.
It's that's what was on the continent when ClearSight arrived. There were the BEETLEWINGS and the LEAFWINGs.
Oh,
and then the BEETLEWINGs split
They sort of
into
merged.
the SILKWINGs, and where they were like the introduction of like ClearSight's very strong genetic material, kind of like made them different enough that they became their own.
One question that I asked was, what's the rationale between having ClearSight marry another husband after Sunstreak? I was kind of sad since the symbolism is ruined for ClearSight going from the darkness, or Darkstalker, to the light, or Sunstreak. And I had really wanted ClearSight to have a happy ending on Pantala, so having her get with multiple husbands means that perhaps she didn't really have that happy ending. What TUI said is that for ClearSight, since she could see all the futures and how she could have ended up with all these different dragons, she was able to pick and choose the very best relationships, and she was also able to kind of see what children she would have. ClearSight lived for a very, very long time, so there was room for multiple relationships, and it's possible also that Sunstreak died early, although TUI didn't actually confirm that. The next few questions are about the writing process of Wings of Fire. So how long does it take to complete a Wings of Fire book? Once the book gets to the editor, what do they typically say and how do they edit the book? How do you deal with it when the editor says, take this passage out, and you feel like you have to keep it? TUI said that it takes about 2 to 3 months to make the first draft of a Wings of Fire book, but she typically has to think about it a lot first. By the way, for writing, that's incredibly fast. Like, normally people take a year to write a book as long as Wings of Fire. The most major edit that her editor has made recently was cutting down the epilogue of Book 10. Her editor felt that the epilogue of Book 10 was too epilogue-y, too much like it would be the end of the series forever. Originally, the Book 10 epilogue had 10 sections, one for each of the main characters throughout the series. She tried to squish sections together like Clay's and Perils to make up for it. And she also had to take a lot out and save it in a separate document. Usually TUI's editor's comments resonate with her, so she doesn't feel too bad when her editor suggests something. In the past, TUI has had editors that did request parts to be taken out that she didn't want to be edited, and in these cases, TUI would have to think about it for a week or so before reacting. Her best editors instead usually will say, I'm having trouble with this section because of these reasons. And then that lets TUI think, if I want to keep this section, how do I solve the problem that my editor brought up? She then said that her current editor usually has a very good reason for suggesting changes, and she usually vibes with her editor's opinion. Another question we asked was, how do you deal with criticism, and how do you decide what is a valid criticism versus just somebody's opinion? How do you deal with particularly angry or passionate criticism from reviewers or readers? For example, like the angry reviews on Goodreads or Amazon reviews. TUI said that she does not read her Amazon reviews, and she strictly stays away from her critical reviews, as well as Goodreads. In fact, she avoids places on the internet in general where she might see particularly virulent criticism, such as Twitter. She believes that most criticism of books is there for the readers, and she thinks it's good for readers to have critical conversations among themselves. For example, she thinks it's good that people think about, how they would write a book differently, what they wish the author has done, how they think their writing should be instead of the author's. However, TUI can't change the books that she's already written, so she primarily only pays attention to critique from her editors and other trusted readers like her sister. She likes reading reviews of TV shows because she enjoys seeing what TV critics have to say about a story. And sometimes the reviews can go over things that she's missed or articulate why she does or doesn't like something. But as creator, TUI said that it's better to avoid reviews about your own thing and just talk to your trusted readers. Reading one bad review can cause a creator to feel bad about it for months, which has already happened to TUI in the early stages of her writing, and it can cause a lot of demotivation and self-doubt. One of the most useful things that TUI has done as a writer is to turn off background noise and eliminate voices that are saying, "You're doing it wrong." She already has her own internal voice that tells her that. She believes that cutting out nastier background comments is how she can write a book so quickly. The next couple questions are about mythology in Wings of Fire. We asked, are there any godlike figures in Wings of Fire other than ClearSight, or have you developed a mythology or religion of each tribe? For example, SkyWings burn their dead in a high place open to the sky so that they can reincarnate as SkyWings. TUI said that there's a great ice dragon, which Snowfall should theoretically know about, although TUI isn't sure if she'll include it in Book 14. She'd like to explore religion possibly in a guide to the world of Wings of Fire, which is the same book that Tui would also put the Scorching story in if she decides to write one. However, in Tui's daily life, people don't really talk about religion, so she doesn't really include it in the books. She said that the tribes do have different beliefs, and she does have notes on it, and so hopefully that guide to the world of Wings of Fire will be written, and the information will be in there. The next question is, will folklore and mythology, or songs, poems, historical references, etc., be included in Wings of Fire? Unfortunately, Tui hadn't really thought of any, and she said that you would mostly find these things in scrolls. She generally finds these parts boring in Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, but she said it's a good idea, and she actually wrote down some notes while we were asking these questions. The next question we asked is reincarnation canon or real in Wings of Fire? And Tui said, if it were up to me, I would make reincarnation real. I think reincarnation is really cool. However, we didn't really continue talking about the subject, and we never really got any complete confirmation on specific reincarnations, like, for example, if Turtle is a reincarnation of Fathom. The next question's pretty hilarious, so I'm just gonna play the recording of it. It was a joke question from me. Branching off the anxiety thing, so I had this like crack theory. Is Snowfall's Great Ice Cliff based on Trump's wall? Because she wants to keep the foreigners, the refugees out.
Well, that was a long time before.
Like, are these things connected at all? This is just a funny crack theory.
No, well, it's fascinating because I wrote The Great Ice Cliff before he was running, even, right?
Oh,
it was it's in book 7.
But then she wants to like make it better.
We'll make
Make it great again.
It was kind of
we will make the
inevitable.
Sandwings pay for it.
But hilarious. But I mean,
the proof that I thought.
There was sort of an inevitable, like, when I started thinking about writing her, I was like, or any of the ICEWINGs, I was like, wow, they have done a lot of what he wants to do. They've walled themselves off. They've like tried to isolate themselves from everybody, and I feel like she is like taking that to an even further extreme because, you know, she's terrified of everything. I'm a lot more sympathetic to her than I am to most of the counterparts in the real world. But I thought it would be interesting to try and write that person, and also but also give her links. Like, that's why links is such a big part of this story.
But did those two things like connect? Like, did you ever like think about the wall and be like, huh? Like when you're writing this book, especially.
Yeah.
Because the current political
climate. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly when I started writing her, I started thinking about it. But I also.
I mean, maybe he got it from Wings of Fire.
And Kenneth shoots spears at everybody coming in and see what he doesn't do. I don't have crocodiles.
He's a loyal Wings of Fire.
Just sitting there.
All right. Jen, go for it.
Wait, actually, sorry, can I add one more thing? So I will say, when I started writing books 11 through 15, I was definitely already had in my head the idea of refugees, of like dragons that need a place to go because they can't stay where they are, because I think that's an enormous thing that's happening right now. And so I wanted to try and get at it from a whole bunch of different angles, if I could.
The next few questions are just kind of random. The first one was, will there be any more fan auctions or events that allow fan-made characters to be canon in the books? How did TYPHOON'S owner work with you to integrate him into the book? For those of you who don't know, Typhoon in book 10 of Wings of Fire was actually a fan-made character who won a charity auction that Tui hosted and was able to put their character into the book. So what Tui said is that she would really like to do another fan charity auction, and she actually really likes the idea of a lottery where everybody would donate $5 to $10 or something like that, and then everybody would have an equal chance to win. The main issue is getting organized to do it or finding the right forum to do it. Usually Tui is too focused on meeting her deadlines, so she doesn't really have time to organize these sorts of auctions. She's not on Twitter, so she can't do it there, for example, and she doesn't really have any good forums to do it. For Typhoon specifically, Typhoon's owner sent Tui a description of his looks, personality, and backstory, and then Tui was able to fit in a small amount of his backstory in the book. The next question was, do you ever go on the Wings of Fire Wikia or look at forums or talk to fans incognito? TUI said that sometimes she goes to the Wikia to look up information such as character relations, but the Wikia has let her down before with incorrect information. For example, it had some incorrect information about Deathbringer and Scavengers, so she always has to double check the information she finds on the Wikia. She firmly does not go on forums incognito to chat, and she generally avoids forums or any places where there could be bad or angry comments. She believes that going online would decrease her productivity, but sometimes TUI does Google image search Wings of Fire related things because she loves seeing the artwork that people have done. She's also joined Instagram recently as well to share artwork that people have given her. Are there names to any of the 3 moons or the planet that PYRRHIA and PANTALA are on? TUI said that with the name of the planet, they've just been calling the whole planet PYRRHIA since they thought that the whole continent was the whole world. But now that there's 2 continents, and then she just kind of trailed off and was like, I love the idea of giving the moons and planets names, but it looks like they currently do not have names, and she also took notes while we asked this question. Another question was, if an animus enchanted a dragon that was also possessed by the breath of evil to do whatever I say, would the animus enchantment or the breath of evil take precedence in controlling the dragon? And TUI said, I cannot answer this question, so take that as you will. Either that question is going to become relevant in the books, or she just doesn't know yet. Who knows? Another question was, since you confirmed REINWINGS to have Australian accents and ICEWINGS to have British accents, do any of the other tribes have special accents, and what would they be? The answer was that TUI noted that she was specifically talking about the audiobook and accents used in the audiobook or that could be used in the audiobook. TUI doesn't write specific accents for tribes, so the REINWINGS don't necessarily canonically have Australian accents, nor do the ICEWINGS canonically have British accents. TUI said that she does not want to specifically assign accents to certain tribes because she doesn't want tribes to be confined to be assigned to real-world cultures. Next question's about ICEWINGS. How do ICEWINGS test to see if a dragon has animus power? It's apparently a test similar to the SEAWINGS Talons of Power ceremony, but TUI hasn't shown it in the books. When Prince Arctic left the Icewing Kingdom, did he know that he was taking the animus magic bloodline with him? What's the reason that ICEWINGS didn't have any animi afterward? TUI said that Arctic didn't know the consequences of his actions regarding Icewing animi, and that it was merely bad genetic luck that Queen Diamond's descendants and Snowfox didn't have any animus magic. The animus line along the Icewings was lost due to bad luck, not a curse. So this sort of debunks the theory that Darkstalker cursed the Icewings somehow. Now we're going to get into the more random questions, so the subjects of these questions are just going to be kind of all over the place. Do you ever get mobbed by small children who are Wings of Fire fans when you pick up your kids at school? Do you ever go into bookstores and see people reading your books, and are you like, heck yeah, that's mine? Or do you go, oh god, I need to hide? So TUI said that the kids at her school are pretty used to her by now, and the 4th graders are friends with her kids, so they just know her as mom as opposed to the author of Wings of Fire. But there's some kids who will apparently just run up to her and like stare at her when she picks their kids up from school. She said that she's been in a bookstore at least 3 times and have someone come in and be to the cashier, where are the Wings of Fire books? And typically she's saved because the cashier will be like, oh, the author's here if you want it signed. So that TUI doesn't have to be like, guess what? Those are mine. She said that usually she doesn't get recognized when out and about, but she was recognized once at a march and it was super weird. Usually she stays in her writing cave though, and she doesn't see that many people. What is your daily work schedule? Do you just wake up on some days and say, I'm gonna write, or do you have specific days where you work? TUI said that she usually works on days where her kids are at school. Her ideal work schedule is writing from 12 noon to 2 p.m. and then 11 p.m. till 3 a.m. Waking up at 10 a.m. is very early to her, and she usually goes to sleep around 3 to 4 a.m. That's pretty late, but it sounds really enjoyable. Did you have ClearSight planned out when you first thought of Darkstalker, or only when you started writing Darkstalker Legends? The answer is that TUI had ClearSight in her head pretty early on. When she first introduced the idea of Darkstalker, ClearSight wasn't fully worked out, but in book 6 she already had thought of ClearSight and got a general sense of the legend story. But she hadn't completely worked it out, and that's why she needed to write Darkstalker Legends. Next question, are the strange wings in Burns Tower from one of the Pantalan tribes? Yes, they were Silkwing wings. Are there any Nightwing empaths? Yes, Nightwing empaths are basically a watered-down version of Nightwing mind reading. Fate Speaker is an example of a very weak empath or mind reader. How have the Mudwings not used their superior population to take over PYRRHIA? Given that Mudwings can have up to 9 dragonettes in every hatching, they should have a lot more dragons, and thus power in numbers compared to the other tribes. TUI'S said that the Mudwings have not been very ambitious compared to the other tribes. They haven't had a queen who has been interested in conquering the other tribes in a while, so who knows there. The next question is, how do you deal with second season syndrome and the pressure of continuing to write in a series, given that everybody is expecting each of your books to be as good as the last? TUI said that she doesn't really feel second season syndrome between arcs, but she gets nervous that her fans will not like the new characters for each arc. She does feel a lot of pressure with each book in a 5-book arc because she has to make each book as good as the last one. This is also part of the reason she doesn't read comments online. Another question was, which was the first tribe and what is the origin of Animus magic? Both of these were Scorching-based questions, and TUI said she could not answer this due to spoilers. What is your opinion on Wings of Fire spoilers being leaked or digital copies on the internet? This wasn't the exact question that was asked, but more like we were just talking about random stuff and the discussion led there. TUI said, the worst thing that happened was right before book 11 when Amazon put the entire freaking thing up in the sample excerpt, and it was the entire book. It ruined so many secrets, I couldn't believe it. She was pretty upset about this, but she didn't seem to care that much about illegal Wings of Fire audiobook playlists on Spotify. I suspect that Scholastic might be more aggressive about that though. Another question was, what type of education would you recommend to somebody who wants to be an author? Can you become an author without going to college? TUI said that you don't necessarily have to be a creative writing major in college, nor do you have to have a Master of Fine Arts in creative writing. Tu herself was actually a history major, and this benefited her because she learned a lot of stories and mythologies that helped inspire her writing. She told a story about a friend who had an MFA, or a Master of Fine Arts, and was very miserable because her friend's professor was trying to push her in a box writing-wise. So an MFA is definitely not needed to become an author. She also talked about how being an editor before being an author was very helpful, because it helped her to learn to critically read and it helped teach her how to take criticism and understand criticism, since at first she was the one who was the editor and giving criticism. Being an editor also improved her writing skill. Some of you guys might know that TUI was actually an editor for the first series of Warriors or Warrior Cats as part of the Aaron Hunter team. TUI did note that you need a college education to become an editorial assistant, but you can be an author without needing to go through the publishing route. The most important thing is that the more you write, the better you get at it. Is there any sexual dimorphism in the Wings of Fire dragons? So sexual dimorphism means, is there any difference between male dragons and female dragons physically? And TUI said, no, there's not. How do TUI and Joy-Ang communicate to get the Wings of Fire book covers drawn? TUI will send Joy-Ang a written description of what she thinks should be on the cover. Then Joy-Ang will make a sketch, which is sent back to TUI. Then TUI can ask for extra details like more dragons, extra creatures, and things like that. For book 12, TUI knew that she wanted the cover to be inside a hive, so she described the geometric shape of the hive and what Cricket looked like, but Joy-Ang added all the details and the stalls. In book 13, TUI specifically requested that she wanted to have a leafwing being eaten on the cover, which is amazing. That's my favorite part of the book 13 cover. TUI also mentioned that the extra book 11 cover that has Cricket on it, so if any of you guys got the Barnes & Noble special edition of Wings of Fire book 11, there's Cricket on the back cover, and she said that version was drawn very quickly. TUI actually wanted some edits done, but they couldn't be completed on time. The book 12 cover is therefore a more accurate representation of Cricket. Are there any tribal subspecies? In particular with sea wings, can they be different based on the regions of the ocean that they're from? So what TUI said is that in the current canon, sea wings have consolidated together in the ocean due to a defensive strategy. But once upon a time, and in the future, they could totally have had different colors and features based on where they lived. For example, deep-sea sea wings could be darker in color, and sea wings living in tropical areas near coral reefs would be brighter. Tui really loved the idea of tribal subspecies. The next question is another joke question that I asked, so I'll just play the recording for it. I have like a funny question that like I think we've joked about before.
Is it the
dad's question?
Oh, okay.
So there's like a joke in the fandom that all dads in Wings of Fire are either dead or evil. Yes. We have Prince Arctic, dead and evil, kind of. Morrisier, dead and evil. Gil, dead. Cricket's dad, who's not evil but not the nicest dad. Chameleon, evil. Narwhal, really mean and dead. Mastermind, evil. Admiral, kind of evil, brainwashed evil. Was this intentional? And if so, why?
No, it was not intentional. I think that, gosh, that's funny. I guess because...
representation.
My dad. I have the greatest dad. I need to say that right now.
Fathom is alive at the end and good.
Dad.
He's the one exception to this.
He's a good dad. I feel like Starflight is a good dad too when he eventually becomes that in one future.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is non-intentional. It's very interesting.
Basically just like
hopefully Snowfall's dad is not. Oh god, he might be dead though.
Did he die from the plane? Oh no.
Gosh, well, let me keep thinking about that. I'll go through my notes tonight really quick. But I think that I think part of it is like whenever I think about their backstories, like I try to like build in like things that made them the way they are, and like
the dads.
Yeah,
they're always dead or evil. Actual. Yeah, I'm realizing I asked a lot of joke questions, but anyway, next I'll get into the questions that were kind of asked during the general session. So this was the panel where like a bunch of people were allowed to come in and just ask random questions about Wings of Fire to Tui, and she read from the first chapter of Dragon Slayer and stuff. So the first question was, when will Kinkajou get a book? Tui said that people ask her about a Kinkajou book all the time, and the more she hears it, the more she thinks about making a book for Kinkajou. However, the main reason that Kinkajou has not had a book is because, first of all, Tui likes to develop characters over the course of a book, and Tui already likes Kinkajou the way she is. She doesn't really need to develop. Kinkajou has already saved the world 1 million times, so if you ask her, all the books are really about Kinkajou. So Tui would have to come up with something very specific for Kinkajou that she would have to work through over the course of a book. One question that I asked was, who did you have in mind, or who were you imagining when you wrote ClearSight's letter to her grandchildren in book 11? This line in particular really stood out to me, and it really meant a lot to me. When ClearSight's letter says, "How funny it feels to know you so well when there are so many of you I'm never going to meet. I see you all the time, especially when I'm just on the edge of falling asleep." Tui said, "I feel for ClearSight because her power is so much like writing, with all the different futures, and also it feels like parenting. I thought, what would I do if I had ClearSight's power? And I would check out all my children's futures and make sure they were perfect. If I could expand beyond my children, I would want to do the same for all my readers, and I'd want to make a good future for all of them." One person asked, will we ever see the Mudwing Kingdom? Tui laughed, and she acknowledged the Mudwings are very neglected. She would like to try to fit it into book 14 or 15, but she isn't sure if she can. Similarly, she hopes to bring back Umber and Sora, but she isn't sure how to fit them in. She doesn't have a specific plan, but at least the Mudwings are lucky and avoiding the problems with the rest of the continent because they aren't being focused on. She later noted that she loves Umber, and she feels guilty that she left him in the wilderness for so many books. How do you make unique characters, or characters that don't feel the same? Tui said that she focuses very heavily on character backstories to make her characters unique. For example, how did they grow up, what are their parents and siblings like, and how did they become who they are? She also likes to pull a couple of things about each character that she can relate to. For example, with Starflight, she relates to how Starflight loves to read because Tui loves to read. And like Starflight, Tui will also always go to a book when she doesn't know what to do. Turtle has some similarities to Starflight because they're both quiet and retiring characters, but they think about the world in a different way. Turtle thinks of the world as one big story, and he wants his role to be as small as possible. Whereas Starflight would secretly like to be the hero, Turtle had to be forcibly dragged into the spotlight. Essentially, with each dragon, Tui bases it on a facet of her own personality or some part of her personality that's completely different than herself. For example, Peril likes to set everything on fire, which is very different from TUI's peaceable personality. Will there be any new dragon tribes? TUI already spent a lot of time focusing on and developing the new tribes for book 11, so there will probably not be any new tribes in books 14 to 15. She hasn't decided yet if she will write an arc 4, but if she did write a new tribe, she would have to have a very good idea. How does TUI decide who will be the main character of each book? For arc 1, TUI knew the exact order that she wanted. First Clay, Sunny last, Tsunami second, things like that. For arc 2, TUI knew that she wanted Turtle or Kibli for books 9 and 10, but she had to think about who would be better as the protagonist for book 10. For arc 3, TUI knew that she wanted first Blue, then Cricket, then Sundew for books 11 to 13, but then she had a lot of choices for book 14. Snowfall was the protagonist that she had to think the most about, and in Snowfall, she wants a protagonist who's very different from all the other protagonists, who's coming from a very different perspective. TUI also noted that when writing a 5-book series, writing the 4th book in the series is always the most difficult, because the protagonist can't solve all the problems because there needs to be a finale, but at the same time, the 4th protagonist needs to change the world in some meaningful way. Why did TUI pick Moonblee over Winter Watcher? In arc 2, TUI wanted to try to challenge herself by writing a love triangle where, quote, you can really like all of them and any of the 3 can be together. I think this is important that TUI phrased it this way because that means she actually did think about Quinter or Winter and Kibli being together, which I think could have been a really cute pairing. She decided that she would set it up and solve it in the 10th book, but then she realized by the 10th book she was conflicted because she wanted them all to be happy. However, TUI eventually decided that she wanted Moonwatcher to pick the nice guy. She read a lot of love triangles where the girl goes with the bad boy with a heart of gold that needs to be changed. While TUI enjoys these stories, in this case, she wanted Moonwatcher to pick the nice guy who cares about her and does all the right things. TUI noted that they're all still really young and anything can happen, so she said, feel free to write the 50 years from now fanfiction. The next question was, some authors really like killing off characters. What is your thought process when you kill off a character? One of the hardest things for TUI about killing off a character is that that is the end of their story. It cuts off anything that she can do with the character going forward. She generally does not enjoy killing off characters. She does acknowledge that because this is a dragon world, there's a lot of violence and there needs to be character death. One of the hardest characters to kill off for TUI was Queen Glacier because she was a good queen and we were almost in a place where all the queens were good, but unfortunately it made sense that one of the first things that Darkstalker would do after coming out of the mountain would be to kill off the Queen of the ICEWINGS. Thankfully, this made more story with Queen Snowfall. Ideally, a death needs to open up as many story paths as it shuts down. Who is on TUI's shortlist for the book 15 protagonist? TUI hasn't finished writing book 14 yet, so it fully depends on what happens. Remember that TUI does not plan out what's going to happen in a book. She likes to let her characters and the plot kind of unfold as she's writing, so she doesn't plan the books that far ahead. She said that, I kind of know something about book 15, but I haven't decided. I mean, I think that Luna and Swordtail are in the mix as possibilities, but Swordtail is having a rough time right now. I also want to go back to Bryony, the leafwing that is mentioned very briefly in book 13, and Io is also in an interesting situation. But there are also Pyrean dragons that could be dragged in. It depends on what particular themes I want to get at in book 15 and where book 14 leaves off. We'll see. So for me, my personal opinion as Biohazardia, I have a feeling that Sky from Dragon Slayer or Umber could be the protag, but I think that that theory could change a lot depending on what happens in book 14 or The Dangerous Gift. How much does TUI know about a book before she starts writing it? How do you keep your story coherent? TUI said that with book 11, she did a lot of research beforehand, and she knew a lot about what she wanted to do in the book. She already had the major scenes planned in her head. However, she's more of a discovery writer, and generally she writes things as she goes along in the story. She likes to imagine writing as planting seeds, and then she sees the seeds pop up over time and she thinks, ooh, this could be good, or I want to add this in. TUI always worries about staying coherent, and she said, I feel like I'm walking this high wire, like this is the book I fall off and forget all these important things. But I have a lot of notes and a whole document of notes for each book. As I'm writing each book, I start a document of notes for a next book. Things like, this is very important, be sure to take it into the next story. And then TUI also has a spreadsheet of all the characters with notes on them, who they're related to, things that they've done, their thoughts on other characters, things like that. Does TUI use character sheets or questionnaires for her characters to develop them? For books 1 to 5, TUI had a character sheet for each character. However, over time, she moved to doing questionnaires for her characters as she found it's a more beneficial way to develop their personality. However, doing sheets and questionnaires takes a lot of time, and now she only has a couple of questions for each character. But she does believe that questionnaires will actually have more life than a character, than a list of personality traits. For beginning writers especially, questionnaires can be extremely helpful. For example, most formative childhood memories, what TV shows would be their favorite, who is their worst enemy, if they could have a superpower, what it would be, and things like that. How much meaning do you put in a character's name, especially the protagonist? TUI said that there's a lot of meaning in the characters' names, and it is quite difficult to write a book without knowing the protagonist's names. Blue was one of the names she decided on later, and she changed it multiple times throughout the writing process. She does have a spreadsheet list of names for each tribe, and she tries to pick names that fit the character. Does TUI have any ideas for future winglets or standalone books or standalone graphic novels? TUI said that she would really like to do a winglet for Umber and Sora, but the main problem is that winglets were supposed to tide over the time between books, but that made TUI even worse at making her deadlines on time, which annoyed her editor, and therefore winglets had to be stopped. TUI said that she was very interested in what will happen to the rainforest now that there are 2 tribes living there, and especially how Queen Glory will manage ruling both tribes. She really hopes that she can do an original graphic novel someday that will describe what happens between Book 4 and Book 5 during the time that Sunny was gone. She said that it would be the very first days when Glory suddenly has these 2 tribes to deal with. And like, someone from the Nightwings tries to assassinate her multiple times, and Deathbringer's like, I saved you! And Glory's like, yeah, whatever. She has the exact story in her head and knows exactly what happened, but she doesn't know she'll ever have time for this big project. TUI also noted that she would be interested in doing a Legends book about the Tree Wars, or what happened to ClearSight after she came to Pantala. But these seem to be just general ideas that she had and not high priority, so I wouldn't hold your breath for them. Will we ever see what happened to Whiteout after the events of Darkstalker Legends? TUI said that it was an interesting premise, and she believes that Whiteout did get to live happily ever after with Thoughtful. She noted that this was referenced in Darkstalker Legends when Whiteout essentially alludes to the fact that only one of them, either Whiteout or Darkstalker, would get a happy ending. What happened to the old Nightwing Kingdom, and why isn't it habitable anymore? TUI said that, my thought was that between the time of when Darkstalker lived and in the current era, in particular around when Darkstalker was using all his powers, that some of the kingdoms started collapsing and falling into the sea. The land itself was affected by the magic and the things that he did, so when he started to repair the kingdom, it had already been crumbling. TUI didn't say anything else about this, but honestly, I think this has extremely interesting implications about Animus magic. I really hope that it is touched upon again in the books, because as of right now in the books, Animus magic is sort of just like an I win button. You can do anything with it. But if Animus magic actually destroys the land when it's used, or if like magic is connected to the land and using Animus magic like takes energy from the world, then that would actually be a big limitation on Animus magic. That could really help the fact that it's sort of a broken tool in the story. So I'd really love to hear more about that. Does TUI have any ideas about an Arc 4? TUI said that she isn't sure if she will write an Arc 4. She has to have a good idea to write it. But one of the ideas that she had for an Arc 4 is making it all about the younger generation. So it would be about the adventures of Peacemaker, Prince Cliff, Princess Auklet, Bumblebee, and another protagonist. One question that I asked during the general session that I was really curious about was, since you're writing book 14 about an ICEWING protagonist, have you thought about Winter and how his character will develop? Interestingly, at the end of book 10, he seems to realize that happiness is determined by the people I'm with, not where I am or my social status, and he was determined to prevent Moonwatcher's vision from happening. However, by the end of book 10, Winter underwent some character regression, and has decided to ignore Moonwatcher completely to fight with his family against the Nightwings. Why did you decide to have him go through undevelopment? I really like winter, so this is a really important question to me. TUI noted that Winter went through a lot in Book 10, what with having the mind alteration spell cast on him by Darkstalker and learning about the ICEWING plague. I mean, the attempted genocide of your family and your people is a pretty huge thing. These heavy events dragged Winter back to a place of fear and the sense of duty that he grew up with, and the fact that his tribe was under attack brought back feelings of, I am an ICEWING and I need to fight with them. However, at the end of Book 10, Winter is developing Sanctuary partly because he was sent away, but he also would have chosen to make Sanctuary on his own too. He wants to be a part of the rest of the world, not just isolated with the rest of the ICEWINGs. We will see him again, and we will see what he's dealing with in Book 14. TUI also noted that one of the weird things about writing is that when you write a book, you can see your character going from troubled to developed, but in real life, it doesn't always work out that way. In real life, you can change and grow, but you can also regress. You will keep seeing Winter changing, and you will see what the other characters change in the background. For example, there's a lot that Peril is doing, apparently. The stories in Wings of Fire often allude to real-world issues. Is this intentional or subconscious? TUI said that it's definitely intentional. She noted that she isn't fully qualified to talk about all the real-world issues, but she wants to start a discussion between readers and parents. Arc 1 is a lot about parenting and nature versus nurture. Arc 2 is about giftedness and powers, what sorts of responsibilities we have if we are born into privilege or have powers, and what we can do if we don't have either one. Arc 3 is about empathy and resistance. TUI wants her dragons to get along and understand each other, but at some point, there's a time where you have to stop trying to understand the bad guys and just try to stop them. Fantasy is a good way to wrestle with real-life issues in a more free-form manner. How does TUI deal with writer's block? Whenever TUI gets stuck in a story, she often opens up a writing log and just starts venting and complaining about her story in the doc. Things like, why isn't this working? I'm so frustrated. I don't know what to do because they're stuck over there, but this needs to happen. Do I just have to make them walk there? Blah. Usually she complains that she'll eventually solve the problem, and sometimes she'll be able to abandon the log mid-sentence when she figures out a solution. She also said that talking to people about your story is very helpful. She will sometimes take characters and write a different scene that doesn't happen in the book, like a scene from their childhood, and that will get her thinking in a different way about the story. The last question is, where did you get your inspiration for writing Sundew and her relationships? Sundew is very important to the overarching theme that TUI had in mind for books 11 to 15. The theme of empathy versus the resistance to evil. TUI likes building empathy and understanding other people, but as I mentioned in other questions, there's a point where you need to stop understanding the bad guys and just beat them up. She made Blue to be an over-empathetic character who's always thinking, why is this dragon acting this way? And Sundew is supposed to be his foil, who doesn't care at all what a dragon has gone through, and thinks, if they're ruining the world, we have to stop them. Sundew has a righteous anger, and she needs to learn how to use it properly. Her relationship with Willow is extremely important. TUI wanted them to have a really great and healthy relationship, but also have the argument about anger, what you should do it, and when it's okay to be angry sometimes. So that's all the questions that was asked at Boskone 2020. There's other events that I went to that I had other questions that I asked TUI. So if you guys are interested in that, then feel free to let me know in the comments. But as of right now, this video is almost an hour long. So if you got to the end of this video, then, you know, mad props to you and you deserve cookies. Warm, fresh cookies. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you learned something new, then yay! And if not, I hope you were just entertained listening to the answers to these questions anyway. But for people in the Wings of Fire community on YouTube who aren't able to go to places like Instagram and DeviantArt to read the information journals, I hope that you learned something new and fun. And as a final note, I need to say thank you to all my Wings of Fire friends who were with me at Boskone, and who asked many of the questions that were in this video. They're what made the event so special, and of course a thank you to TUI for making the Wings of Fire series, telling us about Boskone at all, and spending time with us and just making everything so memorable with everybody together. That's all for this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Hurry is currently whispering to TUI.
He's whispering sweet nothings to her.